Right. Today we're going to look at a couple of things in the Contoso University. And as I mentioned before, there's something they do in this application that I might do it a different way, or it might be a bit of overkill, or however you want to put it, or maybe it's too complex for where we're at right now. It's probably the best way to put it. But there's a number of things that we can learn from this application. So we talked last time about the one-to-many relationship. And I'm going to turn on the projector so people can see. That's 2 weeks running, right? So for example, in that database, we have department who has a faculty member as an administrator. And it's a one-to-many relationship like this, which means that one faculty member can be the administrator for several departments, whereas each department only has one faculty member as administrator. Alternate way to show that would be like this. There's other things that you can notate on these diagrams. You can notate, for example, if it's okay for there to not be a relationship. So in the case of maybe there's a brand new department and they're not sure really who is going to be the administrator for it. You might be able to create the department so you can do all the things that you want to do with it and then assign an administrator later. Something like that is called, becoming mandatory, where you don't necessarily need one at first, but eventually you're going to have one. Yeah. And how do we implement that? We have a faculty ID. As a foreign key in the department table, which means we have a faculty ID as a field in the department because the many side can point to the one. With a single faculty ID, I can point to the one faculty person that is the administrator. Now, that means that when I add or change a department, I have to make sure that there's a valid faculty ID in there. In other words, I have to make sure there's a faculty ID that matches up with the faculty table. Well, I'm not going to expect the users to have everyone's faculty ID memorized. Like in my case, my faculty ID is like a five-digit number. Every faculty person here has anywhere from a 5 to 6 digit number, depending on how old they are. All right. So you would expect them to know that. It would be much better to be able to pick them by name. The problem is we're not storing the name in the department table. We're storing the ID. So that's where a drop down or radio button can be effective. In this case, I would say a drop down because you're apt to have so many faculty members that a list of radio buttons would be too much screen real estate. It'd be much better instead to have a drop down for faculty people that you can select that way. That way, you have the best of both worlds. The user can see the faculty name and pick by the name. However, the faculty ID gets stored in the table. Because if you remember, what they select or a drop down you have your option like this. You have a value. You have then something inside of the option tag. This needs to be for the users. So what will the users, how will a user know to identify a faculty person? Well, by their name. This needs to be for the application or for the database, in which case, yeah, that has to be the ID. So we're going to construct our options like this. Value equals, and then the value of their ID, and then the name of the faculty person, like that. Then if they pick Zellers, behind the scenes, that value will be available for the application to use to put in that field. All right, so they do this. Let's first look at the department model, so we can see how this is done. The department model if you'll notice, has all these fields. By the way, keep in mind that when you specify these data annotations, they go above the field, not below. So this is the annotation for budget, not for name. I had some folks that were confused about that and did the opposite way, did it underneath. No, you have the annotations prior to the field. All right, we then have, here's our foreign key. And if we were to look at the database, we'll see that there's that foreign key relationship established. How does the model know that? Well, it just does. Table called instructor has a field called ID. So if you have a field in there called instructor ID, it assumes that that's a foreign key to the instructor table. So that is the foreign key. We also have associated with this the administrator object. All right. And that'll get populated depending on how we do our queries. Want to know the administrator for a department, we can include them in the query. We'll take a look at that in a minute here. Let's review the database. Again, you're not going to be editing the database to any degree. You're going to be editing, if you're going to make changes to anything, you make changes to the model and then update the database. Here's our database. We can look at the department table. And listed here is the foreign key, which is the instructor ID. Want to look at the code, the definition language for this. We have the instructor ID. Which we allow a null. Again, you could create a department without having a instructor. And foreign key actually points to the instructor table. Okay, so let's look at the code that does this. First, we'll run it and see the code, and then we'll look at the nuts and bolts of how that code actually works. So when we go into department maintenance, we'll notice a couple things. First of all, it shows the administrator's name there. We'll take a look at how that happens in a minute here. If we go to edit, we have a drop down. Now, I don't like this drop down. We're going to change it. I don't like it because it does not appear to be in any order. It probably is in the order that these were. No, it's not even that. I don't know what order it's in. My guess would be that it's in the order of that these were added to the database. So there's essentially no order. So I don't like that about it. I wonder if we can change that. We'll have to look. I also don't like the fact that it only shows the first name. What if there were two instructors that had the first name of Candace? How would we know which one we're picking? At the very least, display the full name, or maybe the full name and their ID number or something like that. All right. And if we go and change that here, so if we make Candace the instructor, the administrator for that, it changes it there as well. Okay, so let's look at the code. We're going to show this code on the add, the insert, and there's going to be pretty much identical code on the edit. We might take a quick look at that just to see if there's any differences. All right, here is the Razor page itself. Here is code behind, or the model. All right, on get, which is when the page initially loads, what does this do? This creates something in view data called instructor ID. That'll be the dropdown. This is where the dropdown is going to get put in a field that's part of the view data collection called instructor ID. And what is it? It's a new select list coming from the instructors in the database, where the value that we want to see in it is the ID, and where the data is the first and middle name, first mid name. So that gets run, that gets filled up, and this view data collection is one way of passing data to from the model to the Razor page itself. We've seen another way of passing data from the model to the Razor page, and that was by creating a property. All right, creating a property that we could access on the page. How do we do this? Well, where we create our dropdown for the instructor ID, there's our label. We have a select tag, ASP4. This is where we're putting the data. So when we select our ID from this list, we're going to put the data in the department's instructor ID. Where does the data come from? It comes from inside the view bag called instructor ID. And this creates within the view bag that thing called instructor ID. I know that's a little confusing. I actually don't like this way. We're going to ask an expert about this in a minute here. All right. We'll ask an expert about this. What would the other way be? The other way would be simply to create a property in here called It's a select list called instructor list. And then instead of filling that field called instructor ID, instead of filling that collection in view data, we could say this. Instructor list equals that. That'll put it in a variable that is part of the model. And then in our CISS we would just refer to that the way we would refer to any model thing by saying model why is that give that? Public. Say, this sure looks right to me, but I forgot to define it as public. So, I mean, it'll work the same way. Go here, no, one, we go here. And there's our drop down. Works the same way. All right. Now, one thing I don't like about this is that it's showing the first name and middle initial, if anyone had a middle initial. I would rather see their full name. Now, let's take a look in the model for instructor. I think we're going to find a nice surprise. In the model for instructor, there's a field called full name. Now, this is a property of the instructor model, but it's different than other properties. It is what we would call in database terms a computed column. All right. It is a field that is derived, or a derived column. It's a field that's derived from other fields in the database. So notice for these, there's a get and set, because we can get the value of the hire date and we can set the value of the hire date. This one, we don't set the value of the full name. We have to set the last name and first name individually. But we don't set this, but we can get it. Get it will concatenate the two together and make a computed column that will be their last name, comma, first. Now, you could call this a read-only property because there is only a get. There is no set method for this. We can't directly set the full name. We have to set the individual pieces of the name. That looks to me a better candidate for this. I'm going to go here. And where I create the drop down, I'm going to put in full name. That's the name of it, right? When we run this, okay, I lied. Did I lie? Save something? Oh, I'm in edit mode. This only works in add mode. They're right, I'm changing create, not that. There we go. So in add mode, we have the full. We have the full name, our drop-down list. And adds that to the list. Okay, whew, had me worried for a second there. I was gonna say, am I losing the old touch? All right. Other thing I didn't like about it, I didn't like the order that this was stored in. I don't know how to fix that off the top of my head. I'm going to ask an expert. Our expert is ChatGPT. I don't know if any of you have ever played for this, but I strongly urge you to get an account. It is sort of a, it was an artificial intelligence language processor. You can actually type in better the way that you would think of a question, unlike Google, where you kind of pluck out the search terms and try to do a search. Like if I was Googling this, I might type select list, ASP.NET, sort. Whereas here, I'm going to say, how do I sort a select list in ASP.NET? Things for a while. It gives you a nice answer. I hope I can copy this. I can use my linking expression here. So it won't be text, it will be full name. How I run it. Format, create new. Okay, that's why they didn't do it. Given up yet, let's sort of do this thing. It doesn't like that it's a computed column. There we go. It's at least sorted by last name. And you could probably add to it to sort it by last name and first name if it doesn't allow you to do the full name. All right. This link comes handy in understanding it and how you can use it to take any list and do things to it. For example, if I had a drop down where I wanted to show cities in the United States, and I had a table of cities in the United States, and I wanted to see only cities for Ohio, I could put a selected here that only showed me cities from Ohio. All right, so I could add a select clause to this that would verify and make sure that the cities that I selected for my list were from Ohio. And then I could add an order by to order by city name or something like that. Okay. Let's ask ChatGPT a few other questions. I love playing with this. In ASP.NET, when would I use view data, view bag, or pass data from the model in with Razor Pages? Well, it's laying out the three ways: view data, view bag, and model. It says there's an advantage of passing it with the model. If you're only passing a small amount of data that is not strongly typed, you can use either view data or view bag. In this case, a list of instructors is a small amount of data. That's probably why they used view data or view bag. If you need to pass a large amount of data or strongly typed data, you should use the model option. This actually generates code too. Create a C, let's do this. Create a web page to play rock, paper, scissors. I haven't tested this, but it looks good to me. It's creating the CSS, the HTML. We had more time. If you have more time, go and save these files. Oh, what the heck? Let's do it. create 3 text files. Why am I teaching you this? If this is creating and generating code for you? Well, because it's going to have a huge impact on how software developers work. Do I think this will eliminate the need for software developers? No, I don't think so. At least not in any kind of short term or even medium term. Do I think it's going to have an impact on how software writers write their code? I absolutely do. Might as well learn something about it. Put the HTML code in here, and I will save it to the desktop. Untitled 1. Put the CSS in here. This is called style.css. And the JavaScript is called .js. All right. See if this works. The HTML. Save. Oh, there it is. Yeah, how did I miss that? So here it is, CSS, best design web page? No, but chose paper, computer chose paper, it's a tie. Scissors. It's scary in a way, isn't it? But again, to be in this industry, you're going to have to learn to deal with this, especially going forward in the future. It very well may be that lower level code can be code generated for this. I've worked with very primitive code generators years ago, but you know, it's going to do a much better job than that. All right, let's get back to that. This isn't a class in playing with ChatGPT. All right, the other thing I want to look at today, at least start to look at today, is this little piece of functionality. Oh, we said we were going to look at the department list. Because if we remember, the department list shows the full name. How do we manage that? With this include. All right. So in other words, we want the departments, so that will fill up the department model all the fields relating to department, all these fields here. These additional objects will only get filled in if we tell them to. And we tell it to by saying include each department, the administrator for that department. So that will fill in and populate the administrator field in the department model. So then we can use it. And displaying, saying for each item, give me the administrator's full name. All right, let's at least start looking at this piece of functionality. We click select. It brings up all of the courses taught by the selected instructor. If we click select again, it will show me the list of students enrolled in that course. So we kind of go down the line. The original page fills in a list of instructors. As we select them, notice what happens to the URL. We get a dash or a /5. What do we suppose that is? That's the ID of the person that we have selected. If we select this course, then get, for that ID, for that instructor ID, we want this course ID. So that URL builds. It starts out with nothing on it that identifies who specifically we want. As we select things, it adds first the instructor ID, then it adds courses associated with it, or the enrollments, right? The courses and then the enrollments. So let's look at how that's done. Close all these so we can start fresh. Yeah, it was instructors. So we have this thing called instructor data. It is of type instructor index data. What is that all about? Well, it's a model that we've created under school view modes. So our models don't always necessarily have to relate to tables in the database. They can be a way of collecting data that we're going to need for a certain function. So for example, on the instructor index page, the data that we need is this. We need a list of all the instructors. We need a list of courses. They're going to correspond to that instructor. And finally, we need a list of enrollments for course that we selected. So we're first going to get a list of all instructors. We're then going to get the courses for the selected instructor. We're then going to get the enrollments for the selected course. We don't have to do it this way. We could have just taken these things and instead of that, could have copied this in. But it's a neat little way to organize things and to bring everything together that we need. So look what we have. When we first pull this up, we're going to get the instructor. We're creating a new instructor data object. We're filling in the instructor part. Remember, there's 3 parts in that model: instructor, courses, and enrollments. We fill in that instructor with a list of instructors. We're going to include the office assignment. We're going to include all their courses. For each course, we're going to include the departments. So we're actually filling in for each instructor instructor information, office assignment, and list of courses. We do that when the page first displays. Now we're not displaying that, but we have it in that instructor list associated with instructor data. Now, if ID is null, again, that's the item on the query string. We grab the value of that ID. And we filter out the courses based on the ones that match the ID. Not sure what this is for. This is what grabs the value of the ID that's on the query string. That unlabeled 5 was actually an item that means the ID. That's the ID that was passed. So we're filtering out that list of all instructors to only include that one instructor. We have in this instructor object the one object that we pulled from this list where the ID matches the ID on the query string. And then we're filling in the courses in this model with the courses for that particular instructor. Notice we've already retrieved it from the database. We're looking through this collection and taking the courses and stuffing the courses. If there was a course, if there was an ID, we're sticking the courses inside instructor data courses, all the courses for that instructor. We do almost the same thing for course ID. Only thing that we do is we join that in a collection of the enrollments associated with that and then loop through each enrollment. On our page that displays, if there's something in that instructor data courses, that means that the instructor ID was picked. So we have populated that with the courses for the selected instructor. We're going to loop through those and display each of the courses. Then we do a similar thing if there are any enrollments. So this page knows to fill in different sections of this object based on what's on the query string. I know this could be a little confusing. Take a look at it, review it. Any questions that you have to me about it next time in class, if you wish, talk about it in the lab, or you can simply send me an email. All right, if there are no further questions, that's all I had for today. We'll either see you in lab or next week. You.